Today we're going to be talking about the Menendez brothers case, a case that almost everyone is familiar with because it was one of the first TV gavel-to-gavel criminal trials that people saw. Everybody kind of formed an opinion about the case. Now originally, when the crime occurred, both brothers indicated they didn't know anything about it. They didn't know who did it. They thought it might have been a mafia job. However, when they were, out and about, they admitted to people that they went down and bought shotguns in San Diego, brought it up, and then one day they went into the family room and they blew their parents' heads off with those shotguns. Well, now, all of a sudden they said, well, yeah, we did kill our parents, but we were justified. We had to kill them because we thought they might be killing us. Well, I was brought in on the second trial, and I worked with Dave Kahn, the prosecutor, and we took a different approach in the second trial, and we were able to reach a verdict. So let's get into what are the real true facts of the Menendez brothers case. Well, what is our topic today? Beverly Hills murders by the Menendez brothers. Well, I think everybody has heard about the Menendez brothers. That certainly has been a very popular case. But in order to understand that case, we got to learn about the parents. And there's been a lot of discussion over the last 40 years as to were they loving parents or were they abusive parents? And you got to know a little bit about Jose Menendez as well as Kitty Menendez. So let's get into it. Let's learn the facts. Well, Jose Menendez, he came from Cuba to the United States. He didn't have a dime. He didn't speak English. He got jobs. He struggled. It was tough, very, very tough. And he wanted to go to an Ivy League school for college, but he couldn't afford it. But he was a good swimmer, and he got a scholarship to Southern Illinois University. So he went there, and he applied himself, and he studied, did very, very well academically. And there he met Kitty Anderson. She was also a student there, and they got to know each other, and eventually they got married. So they did very, very well in college. He eventually got his CPA, and she got her teaching credential. So they were off to New York. Well, eventually it was a family, and they had two children. One boy was Lyle, and he was born in 1968. He has a very strong personality. However, his brother was quite the opposite, Erik. He was born about a year and a half later, but he was kind of the softer, gentler, quieter one. Now, the kids grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and this was their house. It was a very, very lovely area where they lived. You couldn't have a nicer setting. So it had a nice family life as well as schools, private schools. The Menendez family was, the perfect picture of what we would expect in a family. The only thing difference was Jose, he worked very, very hard to get where he was, and he wanted his sons to do the same, and he would tell them, you got to use your time wisely. You can't waste your time. And he was so pleased when Lyle was able to get into Princeton University. This was an Ivy League school. That's exactly what Jose would have liked to have gone to himself. Now, Lyle was helped because he was a good tennis player. So he got into Princeton, and everyone was happy about it. Now, at the same time, Jose's career just took off. I mean, he went up the corporate ladder, so fast, but he got noticed. And Carol Co. was a company out on the West Coast, and they were a distributor of motion pictures. And they wanted Jose in the worst way to come out and work in Carol Co. In Los Angeles, Hollywood area. So they made the offer and he couldn't turn it down, so he decided to move. So the family picked up and moved to Calabasas, got a very nice home out there, tennis court, swimming pool, the whole works. So they all moved out there except for Lyle, because Lyle is going to Princeton. So things were going well, and Erik is in school out here. However, Lyle got in difficulty at Princeton. He got caught plagiarizing. He took his roommate's paper and he resubmitted it under his name without making any changes in it. Of course, he got caught and he was suspended. And as a result of that, Jose was just so disappointed. But he told his son, okay, come out on the West Coast, come out to Calabasas, and I'll give you a job. And, you can take that year off that you've been suspended and learn something from it. So what Jose did, he got his son a job at Carolco. Got a nice job for him in the warehouse. However, Lyle didn't like the idea of working. All he wanted to do was play tennis, and he wouldn't show up for work. And eventually, his dad had to fire him. And, of course, that was embarrassing, but they were going to teach him a lesson. The children are going to learn a lesson in 1988, and they decided they weren't going to give them any allowance, and how are they going to survive? How are they going to get around, socialize? They need money. So what are they going to do? Well, what did the brothers decide to do? They decided to burglarize their neighbors. And you can see their neighbors' houses, very affluent. And when the neighbors would leave their house, the brothers would go over there and burglarize. Take jewelry, take cameras, take any type of electronic devices. And you're going to say, well, okay, so it was just a minor burglary of some kids. No, it was over $100,000 of property that the brothers took. Now, this continued for a while, and one day Erik was driving down the main street, Mulholland Drive there, and he got pulled over by the deputy sheriff. The deputy sheriff looked in the back of the car and saw all this property, stolen property, cameras, and electronic devices. So he arrests, Erik, and they implicate Lyle as well. And now, what is Jose going to do? He tries to find, the best defense attorney that he can get to see what he can work out. So the attorney came in to see what could be done. Erik was a juvenile, so nothing happens to juveniles. So the idea was, okay, we're going to have Erik plead guilty to these burglaries, and Lyle's case will be dismissed. Now, that seemed like a fair disposition in the case, but the one condition that the court put on it was that Erik would have to receive psychological counseling, and it was going to come from a Dr. Ozell. Now, he's going to be very important in our case, so just pay attention to his name. So that's what happened to that burglary case. Now, the neighbors out in Calabasas didn't like the Menendez family, and a lot of pressure was put on them. So the Menendez, they moved. They moved to Beverly Hills to Elm Street. Now, is it a nice house that they moved into? Well, Elton John used to live there at one time, and a number of famous musicians have lived in that house. So, yes, it was a nice setting. However, the parents were not real happy with their sons. Very, very disappointed because a lot of things were happening. First of all, Lyle got his girlfriend pregnant, and they had to pay over $100,000 to get that taken care of. And at the same time, Lyle is getting all F's at Princeton. So how are they going to get around that? And I guess the thing that was the most grating on the family was the fact that Lyle and his buddies at the country club were doing wheelies on the greens, and the family was suspended from the country club. Well, what the parents decided to do, they told the sons, look, we're going to cut you out of our will, you know. So there was a tough decision that the two brothers had to make. Either they could change their behavior, become more responsible. That was one option. The other option is, well, how can we block our parents from taking an action of cutting us out of the will? Well, they're thinking about it. And what we do know, they're going to have to get rid of their parents. How do you get rid of your parents? In a humane way? Well, there isn't any easy way. However, at that time, there was a TV miniseries. It was called The Billionaire's Boys Club. And the Menendez brothers, they watched it. They saw it. And it was about Beverly Hills kids committing murders. And this gave them an idea. Well, maybe, we could kill our parents. And so they learned something from watching that TV series of the Billionaire's Boys Club of Joe Hunt. But now, if they do it, they want to make it look like maybe a mob hit. So they go down to San Diego and they purchase 2 shotguns. These are Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns. And they use Lyle's old roommate's ID. So these shotguns cannot be traced back to the brothers. So it's a perfect situation. They've got 2 shotguns. Now they had to find the right time to do it. And it's the summer of 1989, and Lyle and Erik are going to be going off to school. In the case of Erik, he's going to be going to UCLA, and that was very sad for Jose. He wanted Erik to go to Berkeley, which he considered an Ivy League school. And they were going to get Lyle back into Princeton. So he's going to be leaving to go to Princeton in a day or two. So we're going to be talking about Sunday, August the 20th, 1989. In the morning, the boys are playing tennis in the tennis court in the back, and the parents are having coffee, sitting there, watching them, reading the newspaper. So everything seems to be congenial and going well. And the boys go out and do some movies that evening, and they come back. And when they came back, this is, maybe about 11, maybe it's 10:30, 11 o'clock. And these are their cars. You can see the cars that, the red car, Alfa Romeo, that Lyle had. And this is just to give you an idea. Many people get the idea that the brothers were abused by their parents, didn't have a good living condition. This is their house that Elton John used to live in. You can see his piano over there. Not a real shabby place in Beverly Hills. And here is the den and kitchen, living room. Very, very nice home in Beverly Hills. And the parents that night, it's a Sunday evening, and they're tired, and they're watching VCR in the family room. This is where they're all seated, meaning the parents, that's Jose and Kitty. They're watching The Spy Who Loved Me. It was a James Bond movie. So it's on, and there's the TV. You can see the TV where it was being played. And what happened is the brothers come back from being out watching a movie, and they sneak in to the family room, and they come through this door very quietly, and they've got their shotguns in their hands. And the parents are on the sofa there. Jose is stretched out with his feet up on the table, and Kitty is lying next to him on the sofa. And Lyle starts shooting with a shotgun. Shoots his dad in the torso, then walks behind and shoots him again. At the same time, Erik starts shooting at his mother. His mother gets up. As she's standing up, he shoots her mother, and his mother falls down. And they run out of ammo. So the two brothers leave their parents shot up on the sofa there, and they go out, get more ammunition, and then they come back in. And at that time, both of them blew their mother's head off with the shotgun. So that's where it all happened. And I put this together so that you'd get a better view of what the room looked like. This is the family room. And you can see the coffee table and where Jose was seated and where Kitty, she was on the sofa originally, and then she had fallen off after she was initially shot. She fell on a space between the sofa and the table. Now afterwards, the brothers get their shotguns, and they go up to Mulholland Drive, which isn't too far away, and they throw the shotguns over the embankment, and they disappear. So they're also get rid of their clothing that they were wearing, so they can't be traced back to them. Now they need an alibi, and they call up a friend and say, meet us at our house. And the friend says, no, I can't. I've got other things I'm doing right now. I can't do that. So the brothers cannot get one of their friends to come over there, and so they have to enter the house themselves, coming back, supposedly claiming that they have just discovered their parents dead in the house. Well, when they do, they call 911. The police come out, and they see that it's a double homicide, and they start a homicide investigation. So that's what's going on. And this one detective, Edmonds, he questions the brothers, and Erik is just sobbing away, but Lyles having no difficulty. He's got very much under control. So everything, they're trying to explain what happened, and Lyles says, when we got there, there was smoke. There was smoke from all the shots, and he said, maybe the mob did it. And the detective went, okay, now why is he saying that? So they're not considered suspects at all. They're just, considered relatives to the victims, the children of the victims. Now, when it came time for the funeral, there was two, we could say, services, but the main service was back in Princeton, and Lyle was there. And he talked at the graveside there for 20 minutes, telling how much he had learned from his parents, what wonderful parents that he had, and everybody listened to him. They were so impressed with Lyle explaining his love for his parents. So it was about a day or two after the funeral. They are out taking their mother's computer to a computer expert. They wanted to find out if the parents had changed their will, and they had them look under the word will to see if there's anything. And they looked under any recent documents that were created, like a new will, and they looked to see if the old will had been deleted. So they're doing all these searches, hoping that they can find that will if there is one. So that's what's going on with the two brothers. Now, at the same time, both of the brothers go on a spending spree, spending all the money of their parents, so their parents' credit card. They get Rolex watches. They got a Porsche. Lyle went down there and picked out a Porsche that he liked very much. It was, $64,000 at the time. No question about it. Paid it with his father's credit card. At the same time, Lyle wanted to impress people what a good businessman he could be. And back at Princeton, he bought a restaurant, and he called it Mr. Buffalo. And, he dumps $500,000 in this business, which goes immediately broke. But he wanted to show people that he was just like his dad, very, very good businessman. So that's what the brothers are doing, is spending their parents' money. And what Erik was doing at the same time, he's got a tennis coach, and he's traveling all over the world with this tennis coach. And the tennis coach cost something like $60,000 a year. So it comes down that the brothers had spent over $1 million of their parents' money within 6 months of the death of their parents. Well, that caught a lot of people's attention, especially the detectives, but that was not uncommon in Beverly Hills. But the detectives are trying to find out is who would have disliked their parents and who might have wanted to kill their parents. So they contacted the brothers, and they couldn't get in contact with Lyle, but they got in contact with Erik and said, could we meet with you? And he said, yeah, that's fine. And it was agreed that they would meet him at the house. And he was at the house, and it was October 24th, 1989. And the grandmother was there with Erik, and he sits down there and talks to the detectives. And the detectives are asking some very pointed questions. And Erik, he doesn't know if he's answering them right. He just wishes that Lyle would be there, because Lyle was the talkative one, and he thinks maybe I said the wrong thing. I don't know. So after the detectives left, Erik is in a quandary. I need to talk to somebody. Maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe I said the wrong thing. Now, who can he talk to? He doesn't know who to talk to. So on October 31st, a day or two later, he thinks, oh, my psychiatrist. Let me talk to my psychiatrist, because he's always willing to listen to me, and he always gives me advice as to help. So he makes an appointment, goes over, and the psychiatrist says, oh, okay, you want to talk? Let's go walk around the block. And, this is Halloween, and so they're walking around the block, and they see all, kids in their costumes and all. And they get almost back to the psychiatrist's office, and Erik says, we did it! We did it! We killed our parents! Well, the psychiatrist didn't know what to think. Why is he saying this? And the psychiatrist, okay, let's get back to the office. Let's get to the office. And they go back, and Erik continues to say, we learned about it. We watched the Billionaires Boys Club TV series, and we learned how to, kill our parents from that. And, we went down to San Diego, and we bought those shotguns down there, and we used a phony name so that we wouldn't get caught. And he continues to tell all these details. And they say, well, okay, let's get Lyle in here. And they call up. They were able to reach Lyle. And Lyle said, okay, I'll come down to the office. I'll be there in a few minutes. Now, this is the crucial part of the case, is what happened next. Lyle arrives, and then he finds out that Erik has told everything to the psychiatrist. So Lyle looked right at the doctor and said, look, if you say anything, you are going to be dead. So he threatens the psychiatrist. Now, they wanted to have more sessions with the psychiatrist and talk to him. And so they came back. The brothers would come back for sessions to meet with psychiatrists. And the psychiatrist didn't feel safe being there with the two killers, so he told his girlfriend to be in the back room and have the door ajar so that she could hear what was going on, and if for some reason things got really dangerous, to call the police. So she would be there every session in the back room there, and she would listen to what the brothers were saying. Now, the relationship between Dr. Ozell and his girlfriend was kind of interesting. She happened to be a patient of his, and she had made out this sex IOU, and it said, IOU to certify that her name owes the doctor 500 sex acts to be paid in full over a period of 105 years or life. Goes on and on. So you can tell it was a very close relationship between the doctor and the patient. So what happened? After about 4 months, Dr. Oziel was kind of tired of his girlfriend and broke up the relationship and said, he didn't want to have her around any longer. So on March 5th, 1990, this is 6 months after the murders, she calls up the police and tells them about the brothers coming in and confessing to the murders. And she tells them there's tape recordings of all of those statements. The police hear all of that. Wow, what are they going to do? Well, obviously they're going to get a search warrant and see if they can find these tapes. Now, what are the lessons to be learned out of all of this? Well, one person could say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The girlfriend felt that she had been scorned by the psychiatrist. He eventually loses his psychiatric license. And the perfect murder, what happens to the perfect murder? The brothers get arrested. Well, what happened right that followed after they got a search warrant for the tapes? They found the tapes in the psychiatrist's safe deposit. And they went there, and there they were. There's the tapes of the brothers talking about how they killed their parents. Well, with those tapes, the DA's office could file charges against the brothers. And these were the charges that were filed. It was one count, murder of Jose. Count 2 was murder of Kitty. And count 3 was conspiracy to commit murder. So those were the charges that were filed. And when the brothers were arrested, Lyle was living at home, and he was just pulling out of the driveway when the police came up, and they were able to arrest him in his car. And as far as Erik, he was over in Israel doing a tennis tournament over there, and the police persuaded him to come back to the United States, which he did. And as soon as he arrived at LAX, he was arrested by the Beverly Hills Police Department. So, what is our case all about? It turns on what's called the psychotherapist's patient privilege. And as most people know, there's a privilege that a patient has so that all that confidential communication cannot be revealed. And that makes it so that a person feels freer to talk to a psychiatrist. So that's the law. It's called the patient privilege. However, there's an exception to it, and that's what the case is all about, is there is no privilege if the psychotherapist has reasonable cause to believe that the patient is, in such mental or emotional condition, dangerous to himself or to other persons. It is necessary to prevent the threatened danger. So that is what the prosecution is claiming, is there is an exception to that privilege. The case went all the way up to the California Supreme Court, and this is what the ruling said. Well, it was kind of a split ruling. It said the court held that the dangerous patient exception applied to the first tape, since the therapist had reasonable cause to believe that the brothers were dangerous to himself directly and to his wife and lover collaterally, and that disclosure to the two women was necessary to prevent any harm. So that first tape could come in, but the other tapes were not permitted to come in. So that was the ruling, and the first trial began in July 1993, and Judge Weisberg presided over it, and he decided that there'd be a jury trial, but there'd be two separate juries, one jury for each brother at that trial. And he also went along with having gavel-to-gavel TV coverage. This is one of the first times that a murder trial was going to be covered, meaning all the witnesses, everything that took place in the courtroom would be seen by the public over TV. Now, the prosecution's case, they set out trying to show that it was not a burglary or robbery. That was pretty easy to do. And they had the coroner come in and testify that Jose had been shot, 5 times and Kitty had been shot 10 times. And then they talk about, that Lyle said, hey, the mafia, it was a mafia hit. And then the testimony came in about the computer expert who tried to check to see if there was any new will on Kitty's computer. And then there was the discussion about the shotguns being purchased down in San Diego, and the spending spree, all the money that they had spent. And then the testimony of Dr. Ozell coming in, talking about the two brothers confessing to him about their role in the murders. For the defense, both brothers got up and they took the witness stand, and they said that they were in such great fear they were going to be killed, and that was the reason why they had to kill their parents. And both of them, when they were testifying, they would cry, they would sob, and explain that they had no choice but to kill their parents. So they, did that. It was for several days that both of them testified. And the story that they both gave the same story, and we call it the toupee story. They claimed that, Kitty, in a fit of rage, she pulled off Lyle's toupee, and this shocked Erik, that Erik didn't know that his brother had a toupee. Well, they used to swim together. They did all sorts of things together for years, and for him to claim that he didn't know that his brother had a toupee, that's kind of interesting. And for whatever reason, after the toupee is pulled off of Lyle, then Erik starts telling Lyle about being molested by the father. And he went on by saying, he did this for, a year or two, and Lyle said, okay, I'm going to tell, our father, he can't molest you anymore. He can't do that anymore. And when I told Jose he couldn't do it anymore, he threatened to kill both of us. He said, if you tell anybody, I will kill you. So that was their story that they testified to. And on rebuttal, the prosecution didn't put on any expert witnesses as to the sexual abuse because there wasn't any real evidence that was presented regarding that. So the verdict, what happened? Well, Erik's jury deliberated for 16 days. And they said, no, we can't reach a verdict. Now, Lyles went on for 24 days. And finally, the jurors said, hey, we can't arrive at a verdict. And it was a hung jury as to both juries, the one for Erik, the one for Lyle. So, what's going to happen? Well, the DA's office took a hard look at it. It was decided to bring in Dave Kahn to try the case, the second trial. He came to me and he said, look, Ron, we've got to figure out a new way of approaching this case, and let's look up all the cases about sexual abuse and what evidence is required to be presented in order for that defense to be used. So I did a lot of research for Dave and his team, and we came up with a lot of law that explained what had to be done. And that law was explained to the judge, and the judge agreed. He said, look, if they want to use the sexual abuse defense, they're going to have to put on some type of evidence to show that it occurred. And that was the ruling that was going to be very, very helpful to the prosecution. And the other thing is the judge says, no more gavel-to-gavel coverage, TV coverage, and that was eliminated. So the second trial, we tried it a little differently. Our strategy was we were going to attack the brothers' claim that there was a sexual abuse that was committed by their father and their mother against them. And the other thing was we decided not to call Dr. Ozell as a witness. And it was decided, and we were able to come up with a law, that we could play the tapes that Dr. Ozell had recorded. Those tapes could be played to the jury. Now that helped out a great deal because Dr. Ozell was not liked by any jurors because of the way he had treated the girlfriend. Now, however, the defense had some problems in the second trial. What had happened is Lyle had, in the meantime, worked with a writer and explained what really happened. And he explained how they had pulled off the hung jury. That sexual abuse, that was a lie. We made that up. That wasn't true at all. And it's all tape recorded, meaning that writer had a tape recording of him saying those words. And also he said that he told his girlfriend how to lie on the witness stand. This is what you say, how you say it. So all of that information was in this book that had been published. So now, if Lyle took the witness stand, the DA's office is going to come back and use those tapes that were used to produce that book. So in other words, Lyle can't testify. If he testifies, they're going to know that these boys were lying the entire time about the abuse. So there's not going to be anything about that toupee story that they had used in the first trial. So things were quite different. And I was working downtown, and the case is being tried out in Van Nuys. So Dave Kahn, the prosecutor, would call me at lunchtime and say, "Hey, Ron, this is what I need to be prepared for tomorrow." And then I would prepare it, and I would take those exhibits, those charts, those whatever he required, I would have it prepared and have the detectives pick them up, take them to him so they would be available in the morning. Now, these were just some of the charts that I did for Dave. He wanted something as to how Erik Menendez put his story together. And this was the chart that I prepared. And then there was another one about the sexual abuse, showing the rebuttal witnesses who were called by the people and by the defense, and showing which ones were believable and which ones were totally incredible. So that was that. And then finally, in the argument, Dave wanted something to show what the charges were and what the outcome could be. So I did that. And as to the conspiracy, I had to list the various overt acts. One being that they went down to San Diego to buy the shotguns, and one that they went and bought the ammunition, and so forth and so on. So what happened in the second trial? Well, it was quite different. The jury came back in about 20 days. They deliberated. They came back in first-degree murder. And there they had to decide whether the death penalty should apply or whether it would be life without the possibility of parole. So they listened to the evidence, and the jury came back against the death penalty. They felt life without the possibility of parole was a sufficient punishment for the brothers. Well, after 7 years, the case was finally over, and both brothers were convicted and sentenced to state prison for the rest of their life. Well, hopefully you found this episode on the Menendez brothers interesting, and if you want to know more details about their case, get my book, Rich Kid Killers of Beverly Hills. It talks about Joe Hunt, the Billionaires Boys Club. That's where the Menendez brothers got their idea as to killing their folks. The podcasts in the future are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be basically on demand. You, the viewer, will decide what type of cases we discuss. So you can contact me at Los Angeles True Crime at AOL.com. Let me know what you want to hear about, and I will bring it to you in a future True Crime Files of Los Angeles when we talk about a case from beginning to end. See you then.